Welcome to Landlord Self-Help Center's module about the N4 notice to end your tenancy early for non-payment of rent. The information offered in this presentation is intended as general information. It is not legal advice. If you need more information, please contact a legal service provider. There are important things to consider when serving a Form N4 to your tenant. Don't wait to start the process. Serve the notice as soon as legally possible. If rent is due on the first of the month, but you haven't received the full payment, the N4 notice can be served as early as the second of the month. Before serving the N4, make sure to read it carefully because it is important to fill it out correctly. The smallest error can make the notice invalid. The total process can take significant time, so make sure to follow the timelines. When listing the tenants, include names of those who are identified on your tenancy agreement as tenants, or in the case of verbal tenancies, include names of only those who have been paying rent. If your tenant uses a nickname, include both their legal name and their nickname. See the example with Jonathan Smith. If you have a joint tenancy, 2 or more tenants together on one agreement, make sure to include all of their names. The same applies with landlords. Include full names of all landlords of a rental unit. It is very important for the address of the rental unit to include the full address and specify exactly where the tenant is living, such as the main floor, basement, upper floor, or a specific unit number. The N4 notice is a 14-day termination notice that gives the tenant 3 options. Option 1, pay the full amount owing and void the notice by the termination date. Option 2, move out of the unit by the termination date. Or Option 3, they can ignore the notice and wait until the landlord files with the Landlord and Tenant Board. When calculating the termination date, the day this notice is delivered to the tenant is considered day 0. The next day is day 1. For example, if giving notice on the 2nd of the month, add 14 days starting from the 3rd. This means the termination date will be the 16th of that month. If giving notice on the 5th of the month, add 14 days starting from the 6th. This means the termination date will be on the 19th of that month. Be very careful when filling out this table. It is important that the rental periods are listed correctly because the smallest mistake will likely mean you having to start the process over again. For example, if rent is due on 1st of the month, the rent period would run from the 1st of that month until the very last day of that same month. If rent is due on the 15th of the month, the rent period would run from the 15th of one month until the 14th of the next month. If your rent period shows from the 1st to the 1st or the 15th to the 15th, that is incorrect and you would have to reserve the notice to your tenant. If there are multiple landlords, only one of them needs to sign the notice. The date next to the signature is the date the notice will be given or sent to the tenant. Review the notice to make sure there are no mistakes and that you understand what you are giving to the tenant. Keep a copy for yourself. If there are multiple tenants, make a photocopy for each. Here are a few tips for landlords who are going through the N4 process. Only rent arrears can go on the N4 notice, including amounts that are fixed payments every month. Any other money owing included on an N4 that is not a fixed amount will make the notice invalid. If the tenant doesn't follow the notice and pay the full amount owing, file the L1 application with the Landlord and Tenant Board as soon as possible. If you already served your tenant a N4 notice and another month becomes due, do not serve a new N4 unless the tenant has paid the money owing on the last one in full by the termination date. Do not include the last month's rent deposit on the N4. If this is not collected on or before the date the tenant moves in, it is not due until the last month of the tenancy. Do not credit the last month's rent toward the rent arrears, as this can only be applied to the last month of the tenancy when the tenant leaves. Never serve the tenant with N4 on the day rent is due. The earliest you can serve this notice is the day after the rent is due. Make sure to deliver the notice to the tenant according to the Landlord and Tenant Board rules. Improper service will result in you having to start the process all over again. The most common methods of service are delivery in person to the tenant, sliding it underneath the unit door, or putting it in the mailbox, as long as you do not require a key to access the mailbox. Never post this notice on the unit door or send it by text message, as this is an improper service and it will make the notice invalid. Landlords and tenants can consent in writing to serve documents by email. While it is not mandatory to use a Landlord and Tenant Board form, it is suggested that you document the agreement with your tenant by using it in order to obtain all the required information. You can also document this agreement by checking off the box on page 2 of the standard form lease. It is important to note that consent can be revoked at any time by the landlord or tenant, as long as it is done in writing. So, you have served the N4 to your tenant and they are refusing to leave or pay. If the tenant offers a partial payment, you must accept it, and you can still continue to file the L1 application to evict a tenant for non-payment of rent and to collect rent the tenant owes with the Landlord and Tenant Board. This application can be filed as early as the day after the termination date on the N4 notice. Once this application is filed, a hearing date will be sent and a notice of hearing package will be sent to you and the tenant. If the tenant pays all the rent in full, this means all the rent owing and the application fee. Before the hearing, contact the Landlord and Tenant Board to withdraw your application and cancel the hearing. It is important to continue with the L1 application to the Landlord and Tenant Board if the tenant does not void the N4 notice by paying all the rent they owe, as this is the only way to evict the tenant. Otherwise, the tenant can continue to live in the rental unit. Keep in mind that this eviction process takes significant time. Thank you for watching this module about the N4 notice to end your tenancy for non-payment of rent. The information offered in this presentation is intended as general information. It is not legal advice. If you have a specific issue or situation, please contact a legal service provider.